It began like any other media cycle, with a jab disguised as journalism. Karoline Leavitt, former White House press secretary, self-declared Gen Z conservative lightning rod, had just come off a viral moment dismantling actor Robert De Niro in a debate. Or so her base claimed. But in the days that followed, Leavitt needed fuel. And she found it not in policies, not in platforms, but in a name. Jasmine Crockett. The moment came during a Tuesday press briefing. A reporter tossed a question about Crockett's new voting rights bill and the administration's silence. Leavitt smirked, leaned into the mic, and fired off a comment that would change everything. Congresswoman Crockett claims to fight for voting rights, but she's more focused on going viral than governing. Another angry activist playing Congress like a stage. It echoed, laughed at by some, clipped by others. But Jasmine didn't reply. Not immediately, because she wasn't planning to tweet. She was building a case. Behind closed doors, Jasmine and her team combed through months of clips, transcripts, and records. And what they found wasn't just offensive. It was systemic. Leavitt had invoked Jasmine's name 27 times across official briefings, podcast appearances, and campaign newsletters. Each time she used racially coded language, radical, emotional, grifter, race hustler, none tied to policy, all tied to persona, each one followed by a measurable uptick in donations, social engagement, and Fox News invites. And Jasmine had had enough. On a brisk Thursday morning, her team filed suit in federal court, Jasmine Crockett v. Karoline Leavitt, alleging defamation, incitement, civil rights violation, and misuse of a federal platform to endanger a colleague. The filing was 137 pages. Exhibit 1, the press briefing clip timestamped. Exhibit 2, an internal campaign email titled, Use Jasmine, Spike Numbers. Exhibit 3, an anonymized death threat citing Leavitt's quote verbatim. By noon, number Crockett lawsuit was trending. But Jasmine didn't hold a press conference. She released a statement. This isn't about silencing disagreement. This is about accountability. You don't get to lie about a sitting congresswoman on federal time, incite violence, and call it free speech. Leavitt's initial response was flippant, a laughing face emoji, then a sarcastic tweet. Can't handle the heat, don't bring your feelings to the floor. But what she didn't know yet was that Jasmine wasn't coming with feelings. She was coming with law. The lawsuit named not only Leavitt as a private citizen, but invoked clauses regarding abuse of federal resources tying in her staff, the communications office, even elements of the administration's digital strategy. This wasn't a headline. It was a hurricane. And while Karoline hit podcasts and cable news shows with talking points, Jasmine stayed silent. Until the first court date was announced. Jasmine walked into the courthouse with a calm that cracked camera lenses. Wearing navy. No entourage. Just folders. Receipts. And righteous fire sealed in discipline. Reporters shouted. She didn't answer. Inside her legal team, mostly black women, moved like a strike team. Precise. Ready. And Karoline. She arrived late. Smiling. Still mistaking likes for law. But she wouldn't be smiling for long. The courtroom on day one felt less like a chamber and more like a theater of reckoning. But there were no scripts. Only transcripts. And Jasmine Crockett had brought enough to bury a career. Judge Alicia Freeman, sharp known for her intolerance of spectacle, called the session to order. Counsel, proceed. Jasmine's lead attorney, Monica Tate, stepped forward. Her tone was not theatrical. It was surgical. Your Honor, we intend to prove that the defendant, Karoline Leavitt, knowingly, maliciously, and repeatedly used her official capacity to incite public harassment, defame a sitting congresswoman, and violate protections afforded under the Civil Rights Act. We will present documentation, testimony, and digital forensics to establish that this was not political commentary. It was coordinated malice. The courtroom absorbed it. Then came the first witness. David Morales, a cyber threat analyst from the Congressional Protective Services Unit. He was dry, unemotional. But what he presented dropped jaws. Timeline overlays. Karoline's press comments. Then within 90 minutes, targeted emails, racial slurs, threats with district-specific details. Quote from one email, "She should be lynched like the others who talk too loud." He testified that Jasmine had to increase Capitol Police presence, suspend in-district public events, and move staffers to off-site locations. Karoline's attorney objected. Causality can't be proven. The judge leaned forward. "You're free to cross-examine counsel. But unless you're refuting the timestamps, sit down." Next, exhibit an internal communication from Leavitt's campaign. Slack leaked by a former staffer turned whistleblower. The message read, "Jasmine spike engagement today. Cue tomorrow's email blast. Use same language angry plus incompetent equals $. Gasps. Not from the public. From the jurors. They weren't being swayed. They were being shown. Karoline's team tried to pivot, tried to redirect to Jasmine's own rhetoric, pulled a clip of Jasmine clapping back at a Republican on the House floor. Jasmine's attorney responded like a blade. Yes, Ms. Crockett is passionate. She is direct. She has never, however, stood at a taxpayer-funded podium and accused a colleague of being a criminal, a fraud, or a threat to national security without evidence. Karoline did that. Repeatedly, with intent, and with documented harm. Then Jasmine herself took the stand. There were no tears, no fury, just clarity. I don't sue because I'm angry. I sue because silence has consequences. Because when a woman like Karoline weaponizes her whiteness and her position to inflame, demean, and endanger another woman, a black woman, we don't just lose decorum. We lose safety. We lose democracy. And I will not lose either without a fight. The judge paused, then adjourned for the day. Karoline rushed out the side door. No comments. No sound bites. Just flashbulbs. But Jasmine. She walked out the front steps, straight down the center, straight through the noise. Because when the law is on your side, you don't have to yell. You just have to show up. Day 2. The courtroom's mood had shifted. No longer just public interest, now gravity. No one arrived to spectate. They came to witness accountability. Karoline Leavitt entered flanked by 2 attorneys and an assistant clutching a color-coded binder. No cameras today. But the pressure, palpable. Jasmine sat composed, reviewing notes. Not for show, for precision. Judge Freeman called proceedings to order. Defense counsel proceed with cross. Karoline's lead attorney, Raymond Ellison, approached Jasmine. He tried charm first. Congresswoman Crockett. You are aware political speech is protected under the First Amendment, yes? Jasmine didn't blink. Yes. And you are aware that lies packaged as political speech are not. The jury wrote that down. Ellison paced. You've referred to Miss Leavitt as reckless in interviews. You've called her statements dangerous. Would you say that's civil? Jasmine leaned forward. I didn't say it in a taxpayer-funded press briefing. I didn't say it from a position sanctioned by the White House. And I didn't say it while dog-whistling to hate groups that later threatened my life. Your client did. The room tightened. Ellison tried to discredit the whistleblower. His testimony is uncorroborated, possibly disgruntled. Jasmine's counsel objected. Overruled. The judge added, corroboration was already provided yesterday. You're wasting time. Then came a moment no one predicted. Jasmine's team introduced Exhibit 48. A voice memo from Karoline's phone. Illegally obtained number. It had been auto-uploaded to her public campaign Dropbox. Sloppy. Inside the memo, Karoline can be heard laughing with her deputy. I swear she makes it so easy. Just say radical and watch the racists go wild. You could hear ice in the courtroom. One juror dropped his pen. Karoline's face white as the legal pad in front of her. The memo ended with, We'll ride this until she cries on camera or sues. Either way, win. Judge Freeman asked for no outbursts. But no one made a sound. They didn't need to. Truth had thundered loud enough. Karoline's defense froze. They asked for recess. Denied. Jasmine remained seated. Didn't flinch. Didn't grin. Because for her, this wasn't vengeance. It was validation. Outside, the press waited. Jasmine said nothing, just walked through the crowd holding her folder tight. Inside it, more evidence, more receipts, and a verdict she knew hadn't been delivered yet but was already beginning to write itself. By the start of day 3, Karoline's legal team had lost control of the narrative. And worse, they knew it. What began as confident denial had shifted to whispered crisis meetings in hallway corners. But inside the courtroom, the show went on. This time it was about impact. Jasmine's team called Maya Ellison to the stand director of constituent security in Jasmine's district office. Maya, calm and precise, recounted what the weeks following Karoline's statements had looked like. Unmarked vans circling town halls. Anonymous packages left at office doors. A staffer barely 24 quit after receiving photoshopped images of herself hanging from a tree. The courtroom was still. Karoline scribbled notes, furiously avoiding eye contact with everyone. Then came Exhibit 54, un composite vidéo 3 minutes long, a mashup of Karoline's speeches and the social media threats that followed. Each insult followed by a comment. Each radical followed by an emoji with a noose. Each mention of Jasmine's tone followed by someone writing, "She needs discipline." The impact was unmissable. No one in the room looked away. Then Jasmine's lawyer delivered the next strike. "We will now call Dr. Olivia Chen, professor of media rhetoric at Georgetown." Dr. Chen didn't dramatize. She broke it down. What Karoline did wasn't unintentional. It was a textbook case of racialized dog whistling. Repetition of keywords like angry, radical, unhinged, framed through a lens of criminality, amplified by authority, validated by silence. Then the prosecution read aloud Karoline's team memos, prioritizing conflict-based content over substantive contrast. She didn't just criticize Jasmine Crockett. She commodified her. And that made this not a political disagreement, but a civil liability. Karoline's lawyers demanded a delay, cited stress. Judge Freeman denied it. "If your client was well enough to post taunting memes last night, she's well enough to sit here." Jasmine watched in silence. She had not smiled once since this trial began. Her face was steady. But in that moment, just for one breath, her eyes closed. Just long enough to know the truth wasn't trending. It was testifying. And she was letting it speak loud. Day 4. The tension wasn't rising anymore. It was settling heavy and immovable. Like truth had finally taken its seat. Karoline was pale. Not from the cold, but from calculation undone. Everything she planned as media strategy had become legal confession. Her team attempted a new tactic. Character assassination. They called former Congress staffer Vince Harmon, someone who had once worked briefly under Jasmine. He testified to her being emotionally reactive, that she once yelled at him during a late-night vote scramble, tried to paint her as unstable. Jasmine didn't flinch. Her lawyer stood with a rebuttal already queued. "Did you also tell Politico in 2021 that she was the most prepared freshman congresswoman you'd seen? Did you post a tribute to her on LinkedIn calling her the realest leader in the building?" The courtroom turned. Vince stumbled. I may have." "So which is it, Mr. Harmon? The furious fiction you presented today, or the respect you posted when not under subpoena?" Karoline's team sat lower in their seats. Then Jasmine's next witness, Angela Pierce, head of DEI for a coalition of congressional aides. She spoke calmly, broke down the consistent pattern of dog whistle disinformation leveled at black women in power. Not just Jasmine. Others. Ilhan, Kori, Ayana, all targeted with language coded to evoke threat, all disproportionately flooded with hate. But in Jasmine's case, one difference. Karoline wasn't just an outsider. She was inside, in the White House, with a press badge, with a budget, with institutional power, and that made her different. That made her dangerous. The judge didn't object. She nodded. And the jury, they were no longer skeptical. They were tracking, reading every document, watching every shift. Jasmine on redirect was asked why she brought this case forward. Her voice didn't waver. Because if I let it pass, they'll do it to the next one. And the next one may not have the law degree, the receipts, or the safety. And I didn't come this far to let my silence be their shield. That night, cable news hosts tried spin. Some said Jasmine was overreaching, that Karoline had just played politics hard. But the people weren't buying it. Because the courtroom had shown what the cameras hadn't. This wasn't a feud. It was a fact pattern. And Jasmine Crockett wasn't mad. She was methodical. The defense battered, but unbowed, tried one last strategy dilution. They brought in expert witnesses. An academic who argued that political speech has always included exaggeration. A digital consultant who insisted causation between speech and action is murky. They tried to turn the case into theory, but Jasmine's counsel brought it back to reality. May we remind the jury this isn't about vague hypotheticals. It's about what happened to our client. And then came a witness who changed everything. Sarah Dunham, former digital intern for Leavitt's office. White, 23, terrified. She sat stiff at the witness stand and whispered, "I was told to monitor Rep. Crockett's name online. Track what slurs drove highest engagement. Send summaries." She opened her bag, pulled out a printed thread of Slack messages. Highlighted lines. Use radical plus race bait, then post pics of her mid-yell. Split screen her next to BLM footage, make it look chaotic. The court gasped. Even Judge Freeman sat back. "Miss Dunham, why are you coming forward now?" "Because I didn't sign up to be part of that. Because I'm not proud of what I stayed quiet about. And because I watched my boss laugh while reading a message that said Jasmine Crockett should be hung for treason." Karoline's face frozen. Her team scrambling. But it was too late. The defense rested. And Jasmine's team began closing arguments. They didn't yell. They outlined, connected dots, mapped damage, proved motive. One sentence from her attorney stuck. "If this had happened to any white congresswoman, we wouldn't be here. Because it never would have been allowed to happen in the first place." The day of the verdict. A storm brewed outside. And inside the kind only truth can conjure. The jury, 9 women, 3 men, entered slowly. They had reviewed over 100 pieces of evidence, watched 13 video clips, heard 6 days of testimony. The 4-person stood. In the matter of Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett v. Karoline Leavitt, we find the defendant guilty of all charges. The courtroom didn't gasp. It didn't clap. It held its breath. $80 million in damages. $30 million for personal defamation. $25 million for incitement and negligence. $25 million for violation of civil rights protections and abuse of public platform. Mandatory ethics referral. Public retraction. And a federal injunction barring Karoline from holding any public-facing press role for 5 years. Karoline's hands shook. She tried to whisper something to her lawyer. But the noise was no longer hers to control. The noise belonged to the law. And Jasmine, she stood, face unreadable, and she bowed her head. Not for humility, but for the women who came before her, the ones who had to take it. The ones who never got to testify. The ones who paved the road so she could walk into that courtroom and end it with truth. The aftermath wasn't just a news cycle. It was a reckoning. Every news outlet that once defended Karoline issued retractions. One by one. The podcasts that cheered her on went silent. She disappeared from panels. Sponsorships ended. Two PR firms dropped her. A major publisher canceled her memoir. And when she tried to release a statement, it was buried by the volume of one thing: Jasmine's silence. Because Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't parade. She held one press conference, brief, direct, and brutal. I didn't do this for attention. I did it because history won't change itself. And those who mistake our restraint for weakness should take this ruling as a correction. Then she turned, walked off stage, refused all follow-ups. Instead, she went to work. Drafted legislation proposing digital responsibility standards for federal communications teams. Met with other congresswomen of color who'd endured similar abuse. Pushed for creation of an ethics oversight board for executive communications. And while others tried to pivot the story into a partisan divide, Jasmine never let it be about party. It was about power. And what happens when power assumes it can't be held accountable? Karoline was seen 2 months later, in a sunglasses and cap disguise at an airport. No press. No entourage. Just a woman who once thought she could weaponize a black woman's image and walk away. But Jasmine had taught the country something else. There are receipts. There are laws. And there are lines that, if crossed, will pull even the boldest mouthpiece into silence. Permanently. In the months that followed, a shift swept through Washington. No longer just cultural, but procedural. Congressional rules began to change. A new clause added to the House Communications Ethics Manual. No federal official may reference a colleague's race, religion, or gender in a derogatory context under the guise of commentary. They called it the Crockett Clause. And Jasmine didn't campaign for it. She didn't brand it. She just backed it. Quietly, thoroughly. Meanwhile, universities began citing her case in legal studies. Seminars were hosted. Panels discussed the boundaries between First Amendment rights and institutional abuse. And everywhere Jasmine appeared, from policy summits to state houses, the message was clear. Truth documented and delivered with precision is louder than outrage. Karoline had vanished, but her shadow lingered as a warning. In one interview, Jasmine finally spoke at length. She was asked, "What does justice mean to you now?" She paused. Justice is not just what the court gives you. It's what you build after. Justice is walking back into your office, the same office they told you didn't deserve, and doing the job better than ever. Because surviving isn't the point. Transforming the system is. Later that week, Jasmine hosted a roundtable with young black girls interested in politics. She didn't lecture. She asked questions. She handed out copies of the lawsuit. Annotated. She told them, "Don't be afraid to document everything. Don't be afraid to fight quiet. Don't be afraid to win without permission." One of the girls raised her hand. "Miss Crockett, how did you stay so calm the whole time?" Jasmine smiled. "Because I didn't walk into that courtroom alone. I walked in with every woman they ever underestimated. And I walked out with none of them left behind. It didn't end in court. It didn't end with a check. It didn't even end with applause. It ended where all real revolutions do, in the quiet rebuild." Months after the trial, Jasmine returned to the very same chamber where Karoline once weaponized a podium. She stood, not to accuse, not to clap back, but to introduce a bill, the Digital Civility and Accountability Act, designed to curb misinformation, hold government communicators to stricter standards, and build tools to track targeted harassment against public servants. It passed the House, then the Senate, then became law. And in the bill signing ceremony, the president didn't speak first. Jasmine did. She read names: Sandra Bland, Fania Luhamer, Anita Hill. Every woman who ever got talked over, talked down to, or talked about. And then she said, "I didn't win because I yelled louder. I won because I listened longer. I didn't win because I was angry. I won because I was accurate. And I didn't win because I'm special. I won because too many of us have lost quietly for too long. Now it's different. Now they know. Silencing black women isn't strategy. It's suicide. The room went silent, not out of fear, out of respect. Because everyone in that room knew. They had just watched history. Not written. Spoken. And in Jasmine's voice they heard every woman who'd ever been told to sit down finally stand up.